Have you ever come across an indie game that you play through, absolutely love, and then realize that only a handful of people have played it? Well, that's the case for my newest obsession, Valley Peaks. As the title suggests, it's a game where you are Frog, who has insane arm strength and stretching capabilities, I might add, who has to climb a bunch of mountains and install radios on them for your corporate overlords. I know this sounds really strange, but trust me, it's an unforgettable experience. I started this mountain climbing adventure by driving my car into the valley. I'm here because the people at my corporate desk job want me to install radios at the top of every mountain here for reasons. I mainly decided to take on this job because my dad, who mysteriously disappeared, was the person who invented the very radios that I am placing down, and it's only right that his little froggy son carries on and completes his legacy. As soon as I get to the valley though, I ditch my car, because I need to blend in with the country folk. After beating the game's tutorial, which actually fits into the game world pretty well, I talked to a little froggy man at the entrance to the valley, and I was given the task to place down my first radio. This valley is conveniently shaped to where the easiest mountains are the closest to the entrance, which is totally not the devs' way of trying to make the game world have a natural feeling of progression, and is instead just the way the valley happened to develop. Of course, I wasn't going to go straight to the first mountain without talking to the locals and showing them my amazing city boy music skills. Once I finally got to the mountain though, I first started to appreciate how well the climbing and movement in general felt. It was also really trippy to just reach out a crazy distance and feel my guy launch towards it. Also, please note that the devs didn't tell me to say any of this, and this is my own opinion. But that doesn't mean that if the devs see this video, they can't show their appreciation by pushing it. Guys, I need more views, and I have no shame. But back to actually entertaining stuff. Once I put the radio on the big rock and returned to the tutorial guy, he gave me a stamp card. Now the thing is, stamp cards make the world go round in this game. They're the thing that gets you access to all sorts of fun gadgets and upgrades from the Valley Peaks Climbing Club. And with my first stamp card, I got a journal that helps me keep track of quests and shows me a map. And it gets more features later on, don't worry. With my starter stuff out of the way though, it was time for me to climb my first real mountain. The thing about real mountains is that they have color-coded routes that you need to follow. There are 3 routes for every mountain, and each of them show a specific part of that mountain's gimmick. Except the first mountain, it's super basic. Each route that you complete is a stamp added to your stamp card. If you get 3 stamps, then you get new tech. I unfortunately didn't know this at the beginning, and I ended up only doing one of the routes before moving on to the next mountain, leaving me with an incomplete stamp card. Next up on the agenda was Mount Hollow. Like the name suggests, this mountain is hollow, and the new mechanic it introduces are these little loose rock things. Now, these loose rock things suck, but at least they take a really long time to break off, so you can still take a breather if you want to. Once I got to the top, I planted my radio and once again left without completing all the routes. The next mountain on the agenda was Mount Croob. It was a twin-peaked mountain that introduced these little double jump orb thingies. These are honestly some of my favorite bits of the game just because of how much it makes me feel like the climbing is a true movement-based game now that double jumping exists. I honestly had a really fun time learning how to combine these mechanics on the way up, but unfortunately, disaster struck when I reached the top. Right when I made it to the radio, I realized that I had filled out my first route-based stamp card. I felt invincible in that moment, and I decided that with my newly acquired invincibility, I was going to jump to the other peak just to see what things were like. It only looked like it was going to be a simple double jump, but unfortunately, it was much worse than that. Well, I was back at square one again, but there was a secret silver lining to all of this, and that was that I decided to take a different route up this time. I didn't think that it was going to be all that special, but combined with the fact that I had just gotten a set of binoculars from the mountain climbing club, I realized that each of the routes I completed would give me a stamp. With this newfound revelation, I quickly did the other 2 routes. replace the radio, and head to the other 2 mountains to correct my previous mistakes. Once I had completed the other 2 mountains, I got a watch that slows down time. Who says country bumpkins can't have fancy tech? I also got a pretty cool sled thing that makes it so that I can go down hills super fast. With all this fancy stuff, I officially feel like I'm in a neon white level. By the way, a video on that coming out soon, I hope. Now that I was up to speed with how the game functioned, I decided to head off to the next step in my journey, Mount Tree. The new mechanic for this mountain was bouncy mushrooms, which just added to the already amazing movement system. I was also getting good enough at the game to where I could hit insane clips like this. Next up on the chopping block was Mount Steg. Before I got up, I got a simple glider for all of my troubles on Mount Tree. This mountain added the very unstable rocks. They were unstable, if you couldn't tell. Overall, this mountain kind of felt normal, as there wasn't much in the way of new mechanics other than, oh, you gotta go faster here for this rock, which I was already doing just fine. This game was also released for the Nintendo Switch, so maybe this mountain was supposed to be a challenge to the controller-bound people who had a hard time making quick turns to another rock, but as a computer-based Chad, I didn't have real difficulties. I really should work on better transitions from mountain to mountain, but things like this are the best I have right now. With that, listen to me yap about my Mount Cone experience. I did not like Mount Cone. This is because of the traffic light rocks. They are the bane of my existence. Their gimmick is that you can grab them when they're green, hold on to them when they are yellow, and then you fall off no matter what when they turn red. This mountain wasn't necessarily the most difficult one in the game, but I'm pretty sure it was one of the most lengthy to complete. This is because of how much freaking downtime there was when I was sitting there, waiting for the rock to turn the right color. This is almost a mirror of Mount Steg, where you're forced to go very fast through it. Let's just say I have a Mount Steg playstyle, and I prefer it a lot more to the absolute bane of my existence known as Mount Cone. I just want to say that this game isn't just moving from one mountain to the next. It's an open world experience after all. In between these, I did fetch quests, found clowns, and played all sorts of fun mini-games. This game is honestly so much more than just being the mountain and traveling around. The devs did an amazing job making the game feel alive and like you were actually in a functioning place. Speaking of functioning and alive places, make sure to drop a comment below on what you think of my video. And while you're down there, like and subscribe, because I spend a lot of time making these videos, and it would mean the world to me if more people got to experience them. But that's enough of me begging, back to the vid. With all my yapping and side questing out of the way, I headed to Mount Anatol. The fancy gimmick of this mountain was that it had minecarts that you could grab onto that helped you move around the mountain. On one hand, it felt like the traffic light rocks again, where I had to wait ages for a minecart I missed to come back. But on the other hand, it was a stimulating experience actually being able to grab onto the minecart and having to dodge spikes, the other new gimmick of this mountain. So in the end, it sort of balanced out the positives and the negatives. Plus, there was a mustache convention at the base, which I thought was dope. I also used a new drone that I had just obtained to scout out the routes for the mountain, which actually proved to be pretty useful and was something that I did going into the future. Mount Breavis was kinda like Mount Croob, except it actually connected at the top. It was honestly a pretty fun mountain because it combined all the aspects that a lot of the other mountains had together to kinda just show what you'd learned at that point in time. I was also really improving my skills at this point, and it definitely showed. At this point, I was also becoming more interested in the lore of the game, which just added a whole new layer of complexity and intriguingness to the game. As I got to Mount Shroom, the fact that I was mostly done with my job dawned on me. I only had like 3 more radios left to place, and it was going to be 2 once I wrapped up over here. I'm glad Mount Shroom was given this spot in the mountain progression though. It's probably my favorite mountain in the game just because of how fun it is. I can't exactly explain why it was so enjoyable to scale this, but it just was. Maybe it was the new thorny vines that it introduced that forced me to get into a flow and rhythm as I scaled the mountain. Or maybe it was just the level of mastery that I was getting to. Or maybe it was just some subconscious thing that I'm not even aware of. It could honestly be any of these things, and I encourage you to play the game to find out yourself just what makes each of these mountains special to you. Mount Crag definitely takes the cake for the most interesting new mechanic added. This mountain has swinging crates and lanterns that you could hitch a ride on to get from one point or another. It felt like all the things that had made the minecarts fun were taken and cranked up a notch. This mountain also is solidly difficult and really stretched how far my character could travel in these mountains. At last, I had made it. Mount Thunder. This was the ultimate accumulation of all the mechanics that I spent the entire game mastering, and after helping a random guy fix his hot air balloon, I felt like I could take it on. At this point in the game, I'd pretty much become one with the rocks. I had also learned how to use all of my gadgets to the best of their ability, and I was able to make saves that I never would have even dreamed of at the start of this playthrough. There was also a nice little camp halfway up where I completed some quests and I got to talk to the mountaineers in general. But alas, all good things must come to an end, including the Mount Thunder experience. Once I finally placed the radio on the top, I thought about just how far I'd come to get here. All of the fun, the struggles, and the friends I'd made along the way, all about to come to an end. It was at this point that my boss called and said that they had a big machine at the center of the main town that I had to activate before leaving the valley for good. It took a little bit of considering, but I eventually pulled the lever, and my company's true plan for the radios was revealed. They were using them as GPS beacons for space lasers so that it could mine out all the precious natural resources that there were in the valley. Nobody had told me this was happening before this moment, but I guess it didn't matter what was happening in a town that I was leaving behind forever, didn't it? With that, I returned to my mundane office life, where nothing was fun. I didn't have any more wonderful adventure. And, yeah, that's how the game ended. Ha! You should have seen your face! Do you really think I'm just gonna live my life in some mushy job in the city while a place I've grown to love gets blown up by a laser of my own accidental creation? Nope! So I decided that it was in my best interest to head back to the valley to make a change in the dead of winter. But alas, my changes are gonna have to be revealed in another video, as I'm kinda running out of time here. I really hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I did making it. This is honestly one of the best games I've ever played, and I'm not even done with it yet. As far as I know, it's not some insane game that has like a 60-hour plus campaign, but it still has a lot of value. There's also a ton of stuff that I wasn't even able to cover in this video that you can only truly feel when you play the game yourself. It also just came out like 2 weeks ago, so you can say that you're part of the early bird crowd before it blows up. Which I really hope it does, because it's really fun. I also want to try to get this video to the developers of the game so that they can see how a regular person views and appreciates their game, and to motivate them to keep making great things like this. But, as I said earlier, my time here is coming to an end. So with that, Watts out.